the president of VIF, Mr. Ajit Dawal, my respected Advani ji, and my long and good friend, Professor Vaidyanathan. Professor Vaidyanathan is a person who can make the dull subject of economics interesting by sheer wit. I organize in different parts of the country what is called as the people who tweet to me. It's a fairly large number. And when I ask who should be invited, invariably the first name people say Vaidyanathan. And he keeps the audience for 1 hour laughing while putting in very serious ideas. And therefore, it's a great pleasure for me to come here and speak on behalf of this latest book of his. Now, there was a time when there was a very successful book by a person called Schumacher, who wrote Small is Beautiful. And in a sense, what Professor Vaidyanathan has done is revive that concept in Indian terms. And I think it's a very important thing for future planners in this country to get that central message of his, that the driving force has been and should be the small businesses, the self-employed, that category of people, if we really want to remove poverty and unemployment in the country. The Americans invented the integrated production system where raw material will come in through one door and a final product will come out of the other door. And it involved huge infrastructure of factories, steel, cement, etc. But America had a shortage of labor, and the labor was expensive, and an abundance of capital. So that system suited the Americans. The Japanese, they saw that the Americans are spending so much on overheads that they decided to take the production structure and pull it apart. And for example, they started with the radio. And they took apart the radio, the circuit separately, the knobs of the radio, the glass case, the antenna, all in different places, in small factories, in like a jhopparpatti, in shanty towns, and they lowered the overheads in a big way. And the final product came to be extraordinarily cheap, and so it was only a matter of time when Japanese destroyed the radio industry, radio production in Motorola, and all these went under, and television, and most of the things the Japanese did it by this method. Of course, Japanese labor became expensive in the process, and so what happened is the Chinese came in, and people talk about the Chinese miracle, but all that the Chinese miracle is importing semi-processed goods from East Asia, adding value to it, and then exporting it to the West. Previously, the East Asian countries used to directly export to Europe and America. But as labor became expensive, the price started going up. So to avoid this rise in price, they went to China, where labor was very cheap. And there all they did was get the Chinese to add value to the product and export it at a cheap price. So the Chinese had a deficit of trade with East Asia and a surplus, huge surplus of trade with the Western countries, and that's how the Chinese economy grew. For example, Lenovo computer, it is not really made in China. The basic components and structure is made in Taiwan. All the Chinese do is put this glass and its cover and the keypad, and then put a chap on it, made in China. The only company which refused to allow the Chinese to put the chap of made in China was Apple. Apple is also 90% produced in, value added is in China. But the Apple company insisted that they will not allow it to write made in China. But all these made in China are not made in China. We produce more domestically in India than the Chinese do. But the Chinese have been clever. They get these semi-processed goods and add value and send it to Europe, and in the process they their foreign exchange earnings have gone to $1 trillion, whereas we are still in the region of $350 billion. Why can't India do the same thing? Because if you ask the East Asians, they say, well, we'd like to do it through India. It's a democratic country. We are not afraid of the intellectual property rights questions, etc. But your infrastructure is so third-rate that if I come to your port, it will take me 1 week to turn the ship around, whereas in China it will take me just 24 hours. In Singapore it will be taking few hours. And the roads are full of potholes, then there is octroi, and then in China you have to pay only bribe to the top man, and then everything follows. Here you have to pay right from top all the way down. You get a clearance in the center, you can't get a clearance in the state. Electricity is with the state, land acquisition is with the state. So this mess is the reason. The day you put your act together, we will come through India. Why? We don't want to go through China. We never know when we'll get arrested or when we'll be accused of spying. We are more comfortable in India, but because it's not possible to do business. Why didn't India adopt this Japanese technology and then the Chinese method? Because in 1947, Jawaharlal Nehru adopted the Soviet economic model. I was totally unsuited for India, because the Soviet economic model was based on the principle that you extract resources from agriculture and finance the industrialization program. And there was no room for exports and imports and all that. India, in 1947, the British had destroyed our agriculture. Why they destroyed it? Because in 1857, the peasantry supported the rebellion, or the war, what is called by Savarkar as the first war of independence. So they set up this organization of zamindars. They were all criminals. They told them, collect as much as you like, but give us a fixed amount every year for running the administration of India. So by 1947, our agriculture was bone dry. And it was that time we should have focused on agriculture. Given priority, I'm not saying don't think of industrialization, and develop agriculture. But the fascination with the Soviet economic model led us to a situation where our growth rate would grow more than 3 to 3.5% per year. But the communists were so ashamed of this growth rate, they called it the Hindu rate of growth. As if the Hindus were responsible for that growth rate. Anyway, but propaganda kept it alive. There is no inflation in Soviet Union, there is no poverty in Soviet Union, there is no unemployment in Soviet Union. Many communists used to tell me that. Later on, I had the pleasure of telling them, now there is a fourth item also, there is no Soviet Union. Broken up into 16 countries. So, the economic reform, which really the blueprints were drawn up when Chandrasekhar was Prime Minister, and he had assigned me this work because we were in a terrible mess in 1990. And I convinced him, although Mr. Chandrasekhar was a socialist, but he was a very practical person. And he said, Karo kuch, and we began the process. And I had, of course, the assistance of my Commerce Secretary, who was Montek Singh Ahluwalia. And we searched for an economist who will do our bidding and do the drafting. I searched and came to the conclusion the best person would be Manmohan Singh. And I got him from Geneva to come back. Manmohan Singh is very good when you give him a direction. So, in no time we grew from a low rate of growth to 8%. And same thing today, I say, the ideas that Professor Vaidyanathan, and the advantage of Vaidyanathan is he's a prominent intellectual, economist, finance expert, and yet he's not a communist. So, to find an intellectual who is not a communist is nowadays very difficult. So we have this rare commodity for Professor Vaidyanathan, the ideas is put in. I would say that there are three things that he has highlighted in his book. And after that, I will conclude what I have to say. One is, he says, we have to accelerate our growth rate. We must grow at least 10% per year, maybe more, 12% per year. 10% was never a big thing. In fact, when I first came, Advaniji was president of Jansangh, and I prepared a blueprint to talk about the 10% growth rate that we can achieve without foreign aid. And this was agitated Mrs. Gandhi so much that on the floor of Parliament she abused me and called me Santa Claus, and of course made me famous as a consequence. But the fact is that Indian capacity is enormous. Take agriculture. 12 months of the year we can do agriculture. How many big countries can boast of that? Americans, 5 months they have snowfall. Europe, the same thing. Even China, 3/4 of China is under snow for 4 months. We are the only country which can grow agriculture, have agricultural crops all 12 months of the year. That means 3 crops. But we are growing only 1 crop for in 25% of the land. 1 extra crop, more than 1 crop in 25% of the land. The yield per acre is one of the lowest in the world in India. In our experimental plots of the Indian Council of Agricultural Research Institute and the Indian Council of Agricultural Research, we find on our experimental plots of experiment in our own country, we produce 7 times the national average in these experimental plots. We produce, we have what, 150 million cows. They produce an average of only 200 liters per year of milk. The one Israeli cow produces 11,000 liters per year. Imagine if 150 million cows produce the Israeli average, we would have enough milk to have bath in the morning. The abundance that you can create in India by generating entrepreneurship, innovations. These are something within our reach. We have got a young population which is below, where the 70% of our population is below 35. Average age of an Indian is 26. Average age of a Chinese is 36. Thanks to that silly policy they followed on Western appreciation called one child per family policy, which they now have formally disowned in the latest Communist Party Congress. The average age of an American is 37, of a European is 46, of a Japanese is 50. But we have this young population which can be motivated by a good educational system to become entrepreneurs, stand on your own feet. That means our psychology has to change because we are very stability conscious. We are not risk oriented, we are risk averse. In Harvard, when I was teaching, my classes usually had students from many countries. At the end of the course, I would say, now that you are all going out to get jobs, what kind of a job would you look for? One where, like Bill Gates, do something risky, become a billionaire, or your risk fails and you fall flat on your face? Or would you like a job where every year your salary will increase by 5%? and at the age of 60 you will get your pension and gratuity, and you can build a house and watch TV for the rest of your life. Would you like that kind of a life? Americans would ask me, what's the probability I'll fall flat on my face? But almost all the Indian students would say, we like the second job best. And I'll say, why? That is guaranteed poverty. Why would you do that? Say, but at least it is guaranteed. So I would say that today we shouldn't get sucked into this globalization craze. FDI in retail, for which he has devoted a chapter, Professor Vaidyanathan. What is the problem there? There's no level playing field. Walmart gets loans at 2% interest rate. And they come to this country, they are to come to this country and compete for the labor, cheap labor force we have. Our traders who are supposed to compete with Walmart, they get loans at 12 to 18% interest rate. And they have to compete with Walmart for the same labor force. Now, how is this a fair competition? We are all for competition, but this is not fair. The way to rectify it is ask the Americans to allow our companies to go with Indian labor, particularly Bihari labor, which is all over India, go to the United States, build roads, build houses, where a lot of labor is required. And American labor is expensive. But the Americans will not allow that. They say it's an immigration problem. They will not allow us to benefit from their cheap capital using our cheap labor, but they want us to allow them to benefit from their cheap capital and take advantage of our cheap labor. So what kind of globalization is this? So therefore, we need competition, but it should be a fair competition, and we must therefore see that this country works on its strength. Its strength is its people. Strength is this sheer capacity to work hard. Right from the Thelawala to the trader to almost any part of India you go, where people have to stand on their own feet, they work very hard. They may not work hard in the government departments, but they work very hard in the rest of India and get very little compared to the efforts they put in. And it is that focus, the Indian who has to be now encouraged to stand up, assisted, and be part of our growth story. That's what his book is about. I congratulate him on that. Thank you very much.